I'd like to call the meeting of the Goodhue County Board to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Any disclosures of interest from board? All right. Previous board meeting minutes.
Approval, Anderson.
Second. Sure.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Review the agenda.
There are no changes, Chair.
Move approval as presented.
Second.
And a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Consent agenda. We have 8 items on our consent agenda today. What are your wishes?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second, Anderson.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Land use management. Morning, Sam.
Good morning. All right. The first request that I have in front of you this morning is a dual request from Mr. Bruce Oman and Oman Farms LLC for a preliminary and final plat review and a map amendment or rezoning to rezone 5 acres from R1 residential to A2 general agriculture. The preliminary and final plat was prepared by Johnson Schofield, and there is a draft of that in your packet. The Planning Commission did hold a public hearing on this and unanimously recommended that the county board adopt the staff report into the record, accept the application, testimony, exhibits, and other evidence presented into the record, and approve the request. Upon further investigation, thanks to Commissioner Betcher, I realized that staff has erroneously not been including findings of fact with plat requests, so I did send those out to the commissioners on Friday. So I would request that those findings of fact be adopted with any motion to approve or deny the request as presented by staff. The second part of this request is the rezoning portion, and this is a public hearing. And the plat that was presented proposes to combine 5 acres zoned residential with 27 acres zoned agricultural. So to avoid creating a split zoned parcel, staff would recommend it to the applicant that they apply to rezone the R1 land to avoid future planning and zoning issues with split zoned land. Let's see. And the Planning Commission did review this as well and unanimously recommended that the board adopt staff report into the record, accept application, testimony, exhibits, and other evidence presented into the record, and approve the map amendment request to rezone 5 acres from R1 to A2. As I mentioned, so this is 2 separate action items that will need to be taken, and as I mentioned, the rezoning is a public hearing.
Any comments from the board?
Just a question, and I've had several questions with you, Sam, over the last few days, and thank you for all the work you've done on this. Are we adding that 5 acres to that whole chunk block 1 and lot 2 of lot 1 of block 2 and lot 2 of block 2? Are we adding it to that whole piece? Because one map shows it, the whole thing as one parcel.
Brad, you're not talking.
Oh, sorry about that. It looks like it's one part, one piece. Are we joining it to the whole thing or joining it just to the northern block?
The plat will separate that large piece that is right now, it's about 65 acres. That'll get split almost in half, and then the 5 acres is going to be combined with that northern.
So it's getting combined with the 32.2 acre, 2 acres.
So it's 32.2 is going to be the total lot size, so you'd subtract 5 from that,
All right.
which is where I got the 27.
Got it.
Any other questions from the board?
Just for clarification, so there would be 2 new building sites on this plat, but with the combination of the 5 acres to the 27 acres, because there's a building site already there, there will be just 1 new building site. Is that correct?
Correct, if the rezoning is approved, correct.
Okay. But if the rezoning, let's just say that we did the Lot 1, Block 2, and kept those 5 acres out, okay? Would there then be 2 new spots?
Right, so if the rezoning were to be denied, then the existing house would be in a residential district. And so that does not count towards the section density, the 12 per section,
Right.
1 per quarter. So there would be some A2 land that would then be open for dwelling development. It is currently open for dwelling development.
I understand
actually.
that, I understand that.
And so it still would be, of course, if the rezoning was not approved.
Yes.
By approving the rezoning, that house will take up that eligible dwelling site in the A2.
Just because there's 2 parcels there, 2 blocks.
Yes, I understand.
Doesn't mean there's 2 building sites, because
Right, I understand that,
A2
too.
has a different density than.
A different number per
Number
section.
than if it was residential.
Yes, or then A1. But by moving that home out of residential and into A2, one of the A2 spots is used up by that.
All of the A2 spots are used up, correct?
Well, so it'll be 1 in the quarter.
Okay.
So
There's
the
the other
section is not
section,
full.
the other part's in a different quarter?
Correct, yep,
Okay.
and the section overall is not full.
Okay.
All right.
The other thing, I'm not sure if this is the place, but the 5-acre section has the shoreland overlay,
Yes.
okay? And the shoreland overlay continues, whether it's A2 or R1 or whatever.
Correct, yep.
And-
Yeah, just for the public's sake, I'll say the shoreland is designated by the DNR.
Right.
And so that continues no matter what you are zoned as in your county or your
Right.
city. That is a designation that has been issued by the DNR that we have to abide by
Right.
we call it an overlay district, essentially.
And I understand from the county ordinance that in shoreland, so I'm reading about a contractor's yard, this site shall not be located within shoreland. So the contractor's yard is not permitted in shoreland.
Correct.
All right. So what it seems to me like is that Mr. Omen, by combining it, is losing a potential building site, but not gaining an ability to keep or potentially keep the contractor's yard where it is.
So the contractor's yard cannot be in the shoreline no
Right.
matter what, and so it is in the shoreline. The shoreline is not going to change, as
Right.
you mentioned. So essentially, it cannot be
I understand
where
that.
it is.
Yeah.
By combining this land, Mr. Omen will own this 32 acres outright instead of it being owned by the family farm holdings. So he could move the contractor's yard to a different portion of his property outside of the shoreland.
But my question is, if that 5 acres wasn't combined, would he potentially have 2 building sites in this property rather than just 1? Because the house that's there in the R1 wouldn't count against the density, so
Right.
there would be 2 remaining sites.
There would be 1 remaining site, and then we get into the residential districts, where I could give everybody an hour-long lesson on all of this. Where the minimum lot size is 1 acre, so
Yeah.
conceivably, you could chop that 5 acres up into 5 1-acre
No, I'm saying doing
lots.
nothing different with the 5 acres, just leave it the
Right.
way it is, okay? And then have Lot 1, Block 2 be 27 acres. Would that 27-acre partial potentially have a building site?
If the 5 acres stays as residential.
Right,
It
that's
would
what I
have a
thought.
building site.
Right. So it seems like by doing this, Mr. Omen, it doesn't change what's allowed as far as the contractor's yard.
Right.
I understand that. But by putting that 5 acres of residential into A2, he loses the ability to have a different residence or a different building site in Lot 1, Block 2.
Yes, I would agree with that. And that is not my choice.
No, I understand that. I just wanted to make sure he understood that. Yeah.
I think the other thing is, what's there as a contractor's yard is in violation right now.
Yes, I understand
Because it
that.
doesn't have a permit. And if it goes forward, if we go forward with this and he comes back, it would take a variance to our ordinance about shoreland. It would also probably take some correspondence with DNR, which probably doesn't have the same rules that we have in shoreland with our ordinance. Then it would take also applying for conditional or interim use. It would take all those pieces to leave the contractor's yard where it is. First a variance, first this,
Right.
then a variance, then apply for conditional
It'd
use,
be-
and have DNR say, yes, you can do it there.
Right, which is possible. I have no idea to judge how
Yeah.
likely it
No.
is.
No.
And then I also understand that a contractor's yard is not considered an agricultural use. Is that correct?
Correct. It's allowed in agricultural districts, but we
Right.
would probably say it's more of a commercial or industrial type of use.
Thank you.
More questions? So do we do the first item, or we open the public hearing first, or get the first item out of the way?
It's up to you.
Or got any preferences on that?
You could open the public hearing and then and then take action on both of the items after the public hearing.
Move to open public hearing.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We are in public hearing. Would anyone like to speak on this issue? Please come up to the mic, state your address. Second, oh, come on. Is that on? Hang on, we got to turn your mic on. Oh, they want to catch you. They want to record you.
All right. Bruce Oman, 29764 23rd Avenue A. I'm requesting all this rezone and all that stuff. I guess the main reason is because we're combining, or I'm acquiring my grandpa's farm, or part of it, and I want to combine my 5 acres that I originally got from him 20 years ago with what I'm getting now, and I'm going to start farming that property myself, and I want just to have one parcel and be able to keep my farm equipment and stuff on my 5 acres by my shop and not have any pushback on that, instead of taking up valuable farmland to put tractors and plows and stuff that I currently have sitting on my 5 acres. And I'm well aware of the buildable lots, and I have no use for a buildable lot because I want to continue to farm the land. I don't know, any questions for me?
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
We'll do second call now for anyone from the public who would like to speak.
Morning, my name's Sue Miska. I live at 29679 23rd Avenue Way, right across the street from the Omens. I'm just here in support of Bruce's business that he wants to put there. I know there's been some negative comments about it, so I wanted you all to know that there's many neighbors in favor. I'm here speaking for myself, but we are in favor of this. It's been a good thing for all of us, and just wanted you to know that there's positive things coming from that contractor business. So thank you.
Thank you.
We'll call for the third and final time. Anyone else from the public wish to speak? Motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Any more comments or questions from the board?
Just a comment that as we do this, the one thing that I always look for is that when we rezone this, if we rezone this, we replat it and rezone it, that it is not non-conforming at the beginning. In other words, it meets all the setbacks, because you're going from an R1 to an A2. They have different setbacks. That everything on that property meets the setbacks for A2 when we do it. I don't want to create a parcel
Right,
that now is non-conforming right from the get-go. So I think part of our process, we need to say that in the motion, that it is conforming when you transfer it.
And is it? It is conforming?
From a footprint size, it looks mostly conforming, except there's a couple small buildings that may not be conforming.
Right, and so I was able to look at those small buildings that may be too close to the right-of-way. Right now, on it would be the east side of the parcel, those do look like they are easily movable. However, they have moved around the property since 2022, 2023, 2024. So those would be easily movable for the property owner, in my opinion. It's a fish house, according to the owner.
Right, any other questions? Comments, yes.
Mr. Ullman, is that something that you would be willing to do?
What's that?
To get those moved within the,
Well, the fish house moves every winter out onto the lake and then comes back, yeah. So it could get put in a different spot.
okay. Thank you.
And I think you said there were two buildings?
Yeah, there was also a very small shed that Mr. Ullman could come up and talk about that.
Our local snowmobile club.
Oh.
There's signs there. I'm the president of the snowmobile club, so we keep all our trail signs in that shed.
Okay, is it, so
And
it's,
that's on skids as well.
okay, so we would
That's
just,
the one, that's getting, been moved a few times over the last few years.
yes, so that one, it is movable, so we would just ask that it get moved back further on the property. That seems acceptable. Yep. And, yeah, so the snowmobile sign storage shed can be moved as well. And then the fish house, we don't really have setbacks for fish houses, but that can get moved to the appropriate setback as well.
All right, I would entertain a motion.
So do we need to do it in two separate moves?
Two separate moves.
So I would move to approve the preliminary and final plat. That what
Could I
need?
have your motion also include adopting the findings of fact?
And that it includes our findings of fact.
I will second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Then I would
And, go ahead.
to do the rezone, provided the site is compliant with A2 zoning when it gets rezoned.
Else?
Second.
You liking that?
Sounds good to
Okay.
me.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So the second item that I have for you today is let's see, technical evaluation of the Cannon River floodplain as prepared by Johnson and Schofield for parcel in Vesa Township. This property is part of the general floodplain, which is a designation given by FEMA and the DNR when the floodway has not been mapped. In order to build any new structures on a property that is classified general floodplain, you must hire an engineer to designate the floodway versus the flood fringe. Kathy Clemens, who is a representative of the Randall Clemens estate, has hired Johnson Schofield to perform this delineation. There were some buildings that were established on this property prior to the current stricter enforcement of the floodplain ordinance, but any new buildings must meet our current standards, which is why Ms. Clemens had to have that engineering done. The DNR did review the technical evaluation and they do not need to formally approve it, but they offered comments to the engineers during their process. And so part of this requirement is that the Goodhue County Board accept the technical evaluation and the recommended floodway and flood fringe boundaries as prepared by Johnson and Schofield.
Move approval, Anderson.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. Any discussion?
I just have one question about the map. So there's a kind of like a little triangle that's carved out, and in the lower left of that triangle, I assume that's their land as well? Is that right? So I'm looking at kind of where 15 crosses the horizontal line.
So that triangle is their parcel.
That's what I thought.
And then,
So that part that's not hatched, that's blue with just the black lines going through it, that would be buildable, is that correct?
buildable as long as they meet the other floodplain elevation standards and all of that
Okay,
good stuff.
all right. Thank you.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign.
Just before you
Thank you.
leave, one more comment. Thank you for all the work you've done for Goodhue County. I know you only have a few days left, and Megan in the back is going to take over that helm. I just have always appreciated working with you. You are so intelligent in the work you do. Then one other thing, and I had this conversation with Scott the other day, and I also talked to Samantha about it. As we move into this cannabis, the cities that designate to us should be looking at their ordinance. We're going to make changes to our ordinance. We proposed them. They were looked at in October. They'll come back to the November meeting. And the cities really need to line their ordinance with ours to some degree, or they're going to get cannabis in places they don't expect if they don't address it. The townships are pretty much covered because they can't be less restrictive than us, so ours is always going to supersede in the township, but we don't cover any of the cities that are going to designate to us, and they really need to be started on that process like yesterday to get it through and make some changes to their ordinance by the end of the year. So just so we're aware of that as commissioners, that just because we're getting it designated to us, we would like them to have some ordinance that kind of lines up with ours, or we're going to look at 6 different ordinances when we make a recommendation to the state. And I don't want to do that. I would rather it be pretty consistent across the county if it's possible.
And have we let the cities know that?
Way of doing that?
Multiple times, but
I think it's actually the language in the designation agreement that we drafted contains that kind of wording indicating to them that they still have to deal with their own zoning issues, and that the only thing they're designating to us is the registration and the enforcement piece of it, not the zoning.
And I agree with that, but you know who's going to have egg on their face if they get a cannabis someplace they don't want it in their city, and we're the ones that do the registration. We're going to have it. So they really need to be on the ball and get working on that.
And do we have any
Expeditious.
communication with them to know if they are in fact working on it, or we just send a letter and it kind of goes off to Never Never Land?
We sent, when I sent the delegation agreements, there was a message in there. I haven't had any direct communication with any of the city administrators there about drafting their own ordinances. There's been no questions of them to me from them, I'll say.
And should we follow up and see if they're doing it, or
We can do another follow-up.
call where we actually talk to them, but we know it isn't in a pile somewhere to be looked at?
Yeah.
Well, I printed out what we are proposing in the October meeting of the Planning Commission. I plan on sitting down with the city of Cannon Falls and asking them, this is what we're doing, where are you in this process, and are you moving forward? Because I think us communicating with them as commissioners may have some weight too, because we don't want to, we want them to do it the way they want to do it.
Of course.
And if they want to have it in different places, that's fine, but they need to be communicating that to us, and I think sometimes some of that falls on commissioners, so.
Well, I
thank
think
you.
there's some of it just, it's easier to just let the county do it, and I don't know if
Yeah,
there's anything
I do
more,
too.
but if they don't take that last step.
Yeah, they're going to end up with it processing somewhere they don't want it getting processed, and they're going to end up with it, you know, many of the cities got ag land in them. Do they want them to actually grow it in the ag land in the cities? Or do they want to zone it out of that and say, no, it's got to be outside the city limits? And what their legal ramification to do that is, I don't know, I think they've kind of taken this step that, well, we're going to delegate it to the county and now it's off our plate. It's not off their plate at all, not at all.
Right.
And we need to be, that's why I will personally go sit down with
And I
Cannon
think for
Falls.
Linda and I, Red Wing is addressing it, so I think it's you three guys who have communities that may not be.
I will also contact my town.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. We appreciate so much all you've done. Thank you. Juvenile detention contract proposal.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning. How are you?
So as we pivoted from the JDC the last time, and there was discussion of a juvenile contract bed, I was tasked with checking into the availability of beds and the costs, and that information is in front of you. So currently, only Prairie Lakes and Houston County have availability for contract beds, Houston County being much cheaper at $250 versus $440. So, and Steve O'Keefe reviewed the Houston County contract. We have some questions about number 9, which I have emailed Houston County about and have not heard back regarding workers' comp claim expenses. So we have not heard back from Houston County regarding that because Mr. O'Keefe is worried about the potential cost of that if something went wrong while a juvenile was misbehaving with Houston County. So I'm open to questions. There are some concerns regarding the budget. I was on the phone with Mike Zorn yesterday. So even though Court Services has $160,000 budgeted for our out-of-home placement costs for '25, he does not feel it's appropriate that we retain a bed under that budget line item. So there we have a little issue. I'm not quite sure if we can solve today or not.
So one of my questions was, on average, how many kids do we have in juvenile detention? I mean, I know that's a loaded question, and it's not easy to answer, but it's a whole lot easier if I know that 2 months of the year we're going to have for sure somebody in a bed, or 3 months of a year we're going to have somebody in a bed, or whatever.
And that is very difficult to answer. You have the bed use we had for '23, I think, in front of you in some different facilities. So we have a couple of issues. One is sometimes that bed is used without us. So when we have that contract bed, Red Wing Police and Sheriff's Department would know that bed is available, and that would be their first call on somebody prior to they come into court. For us using them, it could be anywhere from 1 month to 6 months, depending on the type of child we have at that moment. Right now, we have 7 kids on the juvenile caseload who are demanding a lot of attention. The other, I talked with the juvenile agents about that, the other issue is they have completely changed their practices in the last 3 years because of a lack of beds. I mean, they do everything possible before they play, so getting back into that mode of knowing they have a bed available, it's going to take some time for them, maybe a month or so before they think, right, we can go to Houston County. The other issue is Houston County is still 2 hours away. If Red Wing PD picks somebody up on a Saturday night, I don't know if they'll have staff to drive them 2 hours. Yeah, we have some of those logistical issues too. I don't know. We wanted Dakota County. I called Dakota County, East Central, those that were an hour away. There was no possible way.
Well, in my conversations with one of the commissioners from Houston County, I know they're an 8-day hold right now. They also had the DOC down there and looked at it, and the DOC said it wouldn't take much for us to turn this into a permanent hold. So they're looking at that too, which then transportation may get cut down if the courts aren't putting them in an 8-day hold, they're putting them in a longer-term hold. That would really cut down on those costs.
On the transport.
I just look at and I hear the amount of staff time we spend just trying to find a bed. And if we can eliminate some of that, whether it's we contract for 1 bed or we contract for 2 beds.
And I think we start with 1 and see how much we use it, who's utilizing it, court services, Red Wing Police Department, Sheriff's Department.
Right, yeah. I mean, what is it, $90,000 to reserve a bed for a year? It's
Yeah.
like.
And they're going to be snapped up at that price.
Yeah, that's just, from where we're sending them now at $400, $500 a bed, I mean, even though there's transportation, I get that, I totally understand that, but are we serving the juvenile better by getting them to a facility sooner rather than later? That's a loaded question. I get it. This is all very contrary to what we really probably want to see juveniles in, but there are certain juveniles that's the only option.
And the juvenile brain responds to faster consequences. Right now, very few juveniles are receiving consequences because we don't have the ability to. I mean, we hodgepodge things together for that, but the reality is they all talk also, so they know nothing's going to happen.
Right.
Well, and it would appear that contracting for 1 bed is actually going to save us money, not if you compare it to not contracting for 1 bed. And contracting for 1 bed and seeing how it goes makes perfect sense to me.
Sheriff Kelly, would you have any comment on this?
No, this would make our job easier on the road for our night sergeants to try to find beds. All these facilities and judges, probation officers.
Not on. Your mic isn't on, sir. I don't know.
Hold it up.
The boss is coming.
Just my comment, this would be a great benefit to the county. I do think it will save us money in the long run.
Rhonda has a great point. Just let's reevaluate. Let's get something in place for us next year, instead of hoping we find a bed. We're never guaranteed a bed, so this would help us. It would help probation. So that's my comment. Anything else for me?
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And then Commissioners, I would echo those comments as well. I think we, as the prosecutors, we get calls from law enforcement a lot asking what to do with juveniles who are out of control and can't be managed in their homes, and the parents are looking for places to put them. We can't find them. We have to send them back home. The officers have to send them back home. So it really puts them in a really tough position. And having a designated bed, I think we'll end up using it more than we know, just simply because there is no place to put them now. So officers know that going into it, and even the most difficult behavioral issues that they're trying to address, they just don't have an answer for. It happens more often than you think, and it would be interesting to find out what our actual usage is over the course of a year. And again, that dollar figure in the scheme of things is probably small compared to what we would be spending if we were able to find beds for all the kids that we need to have this service for, and we're paying at a higher price. That's my 2 cents on that.
How many beds are available down in Houston?
Houston doesn't have any contracted yet, so they have 8 beds available.
So what happens in 2 years, we say, wow, we wish we had a second bed, and we didn't have it. We just had the one. I mean, one is better than none, obviously, but I mean, when we talk about the money savings, is it crazy to do contract 2? I
I
mean,
would suggest doing one to see
just do
how
one,
often
okay.
we use it. And the other thing is, I mean, hopefully they go to a longer day hold.
Yep.
We don't really want to hold kids long in just a holding facility. We want to
Right.
get them someplace where they're getting treatment and assessment, et cetera. So for us, it's that stopgap before we can get them to the next place.
Right, and that's the point I would make too, is that most of the holds are going to be short-term holds. They're not going to be long-term holds. So there won't be one person occupying that space for a long period of time. Usually it's up to 7 days, 7 days that they would be there before we find a different placement for them, or that they have calmed down to the point where the family can now handle them back at home. So I think we're talking, again, short-term, a larger number of kids that would be going through that, and not just 1 or 2.
is this something that the parents can drive them to also?
No,
No. This is, they're in custody.
they're in
Yep.
custody.
Okay.
And my understanding is they can handle male and female.
Correct.
It sounds like you're hopeful just having it there will be somewhat of a deterrent because people will know about it. And then also, it sounds like Houston County has more capacity, and depending on how this goes for them for the year, they may make some changes as well. So I think the one bed makes sense.
Well, and Todd brings up a good point, because in 2 years, they could be all contracted out.
Well, they could be. But if they are, they
I
might.
would not wait a year to see how it goes. I would evaluate this and talk about it in 3 months, talk about it in 6 months. And we're way better to be, we have fund balance. Your comment about not using the dollars that's on that line right now, I agree with that. We could use fund balance to do this and then figure out in the 26 budget, is it a line? Are we going to continue? Does it work? But we could do it with fund balance this year.
My guess is the contract will not last at 250 very long either. I think they will learn very quickly they can charge more.
Well, their proximity is going to be somewhat of a limit for a lot of, but then by the same token, people are going to Bemidji or wherever when they have to, so.
Any other comments, questions?
So are you looking for direction today?
I'm requesting an approval for one contract bed for 26 at Houston County, as Mr. O'Keefe and I work through the contract to make sure it's going to meet our needs.
For 25?
25, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I would move that you do that, and then when the contract's ready, it'll come back to us.
We can do that.
If there's changes in the contract, we should probably see that,
Yeah.
rubber stamp it, or stamp it, but. I would move that
You
we,
can approve it pending county attorney approval, too.
okay, then I'll do that. I'll move that we contract for one bed pending county attorney approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion?
And just that we'll incorporate that in the budget as a fund balance use to not deplete that line in the regular budget.
Also second that, Linda?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion
Thanks for your
carries.
work on
Thank you.
this.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Makes life a little bit easier, Rhonda.
For your information, these are items that we've all looked at. Number 2, Turnback, CASA 10. Any questions on that for anyone? And new and old business. Anyone have any new and old business? Committee reports. I guess as far as the Planning Advisory Committee, we do want to take a look at, I think Sam has sent out some information about the issue we have right now regarding a
Plan.
PUD.
Yeah.
Yep. So we just take your time and take a look at it. It was tabled in September. At the October meeting, it was a 3-3 vote. So this is really something that we need to really review and look at. So if you take a few minutes and read it over.
I do understand that there were like 45 people at the Florence meeting.
Okay,
And are you aware of what the concerns are of the Florence community?
I think it's the more touristy. I mean, renting it out, not owning the facility. There's quite a few factors involved in it. Mineola was here at our public hearing
Saw
too,
that, I
and
watched
and
it.
they said they were not, because they have around the campground.
Right.
You
But
know,
they didn't want
so-
that to become cluster housing.
Sure,
At the campground.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at it, and it'll be coming in front of us shortly, so. Claims, review the claims.
Move approval to pay the claims.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carried. How about an adjournment?
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Thank you, everyone.